How's it going, guys? I wanted to make one about the importance of merging the two primordial forces within yourself, the divine feminine and the divine masculine, and what kind of benefits that can lead to as far as this kind of stuff goes. So, one without the other just doesn't serve as well as it could when it would be working with one. They both have their benefits, of course. If you break it down to our existence, basically you could say that the masculine part of us is our body and is like the fatherly aspect, well, the physical denseness that makes up the physical plane, that includes all the spiritual aspects but through their physical conveyances of themselves, whereas the divine feminine aspect of us would be our spirit, which comes from the creation, which gives birth to all, which is the feminine aspect. So our spirit would be the spiritual aspects of everything, the spiritual aspects of the elements, and the masculine would be the physical aspects of spirit, which are the elements, but the way they convey themselves on the physical plane. You can also look at it like that's kind of where the stereotypical things come from, like men do the heavy lifting because they're physically more capable when it comes, more than often physically more capable when it comes to physical shit, and women are just more than often a little bit smarter and wittier than men are. And a great time period to look at this as an example is what I like to call like the Viking mindset, or the savage mindset. So back in the days of of the Vikings and the Norse people, Satyr was the main magic back then, and it was something that the women did more than often, because the Vikings, that they were the men were like the very exaggerated aspect of the divine masculine. They were just all about combat and destroying and taking, raping and pillaging and taking everyone's shit. And they didn't think at all, that they weren't smart. They just were powerful, so they'd go in and do that. But when they started meeting opponents who were smarter than they were, it didn't matter how strong they were, because intelligence always outdoes strength in the long run. And the women that were in the same civilization as these Vikings, their women did satyr, which was the magic back then, because they were just naturally, as women, more in touch with the divine feminine aspect of nature, which is spirit, which comes with magic and stuff like that, and doing divination, and being able to be a seer and whatnot. And so the women did that, and the men frowned upon doing that. Even if you were a man and you did that, it was frowned upon because it was considered unmanly. But that's just because they were pretty much bigots. But that's the point of the Viking aspect, the mindset as a man, is that they were just strictly about the physical aspect. Take your shit, sex, money, killing, and that was it. Whereas they used their women for being able to see into the future and shit like that, and do magic, and and do sacrifices and whatnot, because they very much believed in it. The men did, and knew it was true. They just knew that, quote unquote, knew that it was something that the women were supposed to do. And again, like I said, the Vikings, they did great because they were the best warriors. But once they came across an enemy who was also intelligent, not just instinctual, but intellectual as well, then they lost, because they couldn't think around them. They weren't as smart as them. And both these sides of us that we have, it's important to understand that we are made up of 50-50% of this. We're half spirit, we're half here on the physical plane, and we have to be able to nourish both of those aspects of ourselves. Just as we feed our physical bodies, we have to be able to feed our spiritual aspects of ourselves as well. And it's also important to not neglect either one of them, because that's what goes into what they say about feeding your demons or whatever. You don't do anything bad, but everyone has their thing that they do, whether it's watching horror movies or getting in fights with people every now and again. They have something that they do to feed their animal inside of them, which is, it's the difference between animal and animus. And that would be, animus is when there's a divine spark incarnate in the animal, which is what we as humans are. We're basically an animal, But the difference between us and the animal is that we have a divine spark of God in us, and we have an awareness that we'll be able to make our way to that of an intellectual level that's past animals, because animals don't have intellect for the most part. They have instinct, which is what we work off as well. But the intellect aspect makes it so we have to nourish that. And we do that in ways like seeking out spiritual knowledge and reading books and going to school and seeking out companionship with other people as friends. Whereas when we're feeding our wild side, we're doing things more like sex, food, competition, things like that. Things that make us feel like egotistical in the wrong kind of way. Whereas the egotistical and the spiritual side would be just the realizations of self. And there's two realizations of self in Raja Yoga, which are also just very true in general when you're waking up to what you really are. And those two awakenings of self are kind of a good example of the divine and masculine aspect of that too. Whereas the first awakening is that you are not just a vessel. Your life will go on beyond the vessel. When you realize that you've been here before and you'll be here again, and that you are going to outlive your vessel just like you have many times. That's the first awakening. And I guess you could say that is the masculine awakening, because that has to do with your vessel. And then the next awakening, which can be done pretty easily through psychedelic drugs, is the awakening to realize that you are one with everything. Just everything that is, because you're from creation, which is the feminine aspect. You're straight from that, just like everything else is. You were birthed from that, so you are one with it, and your vibration enters all other vibrations. And that's when you start feeling real in touch with nature and understanding nature and seeing it very differently as well. Because with these awakening comes a change in your third eye, one awakening of your kundalini, which will pretty much change every sensory perception that you have, and kind of tweak it up a little bit to a beautiful tune, though of course not a scary one. Sometimes it can be scary in the beginning, but overall it's an amazing thing. It's a beautiful experience. So basically, again, just to review, the masculine aspects of us and of the life that we live is the physicality of everything. It's the physical conveyance of the spiritual aspects of nature. So it's the things that come from the feminine aspect in creation, and then it's what they look like and what they manifest as when they're on the physical plane. Whereas the feminine aspect would be all those same things on the physical plane that are the divine masculine, except before they're conveyed into the physical, and it would be them in spiritual form still, which is just the creation of everything. So the feminine aspect is the material of everything, which is spirit, what everything is birthed from. And then the masculine aspect of everything is it when it is conveyed onto the physical realm in its physical form. So the elements, just as they are, they're elemental beings and everything like that, they are the feminine aspect of that. It's the omnipresence, and then the physical aspect of the elements are them as we know them. Earth, air, fire, and water. And then the fifth element, of course, is aether, which is the divine feminine aspect. It's from which all the other elements were birthed from. So that's just a little run by on the divine feminine and masculine, and how to distinguish between them, and why it's important to kind of merge those together in like what we'd call the alchemical marriage. And it's something to be went by much further. So I will return. Thank you guys very much.